Welcome to the Happiness Matters podcast, where we'll explore happiness at work and show you how to coach yourself to be happier there and more successful too, no matter what.
Hello to you all from Cape Town. I'm Julia Seal, your host and coach, and I am delighted to be with you here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us here at Happiness Matters to learn more about coaching ourselves to happiness and success no matter what. We recently began looking into the science of your happiness, how the world's academics are choosing to define happiness, and what constructs they are including in their happiness definitions and why. All this with the intention of ensuring that we create robust and meaningful definitions of happiness and success no matter what for ourselves. And I interrupted these insight sessions for last week's long episode COVID-19, keep calm and coach yourself. I wanted to reach out to all of us across the world who are being directly impacted by the pandemic and who need help to stop spiraling thoughts and emotions, and also ideas on how to best use this time to practice your self-coaching in earnest. Did you find it useful? I hope so. Please do me a favor today. Please forward this episode to as many people as you can think of. Some safe social sharing for you, or going viral in a good way. Tomorrow is the 1st of April, and a day that many of us in or with links to Europe think of as April Fool's Day. It's also Fraser and my wedding anniversary. Yes, we got married on April Fool's Day. What can I say? The world has gone a bit mad. So April Fools feels like a bit of a strange celebration. What we're going through now globally seems as far-fetched as any April Fool's prank. So if you are planning any jokes or hoaxes, take care to lighten the emotional and mental load of the pandemic, not add to it. But that's tomorrow. Today is the last day of March, and we know from previous episodes that March is Happiness Month. And while our world is being shaken up by COVID-19, perhaps this is an opportunity for the UN's global goals and happiness resolutions to really get traction. The World Happiness Report for 2020 was released last week. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'll link to it in the show notes for you too. And I'll also post a link to Capitalism as well, as you might find this interesting reading over this time. Last year, the United Nations New Economic Paradigm Project called on all people and all nations to adopt Capitalism, a new economic paradigm in order to achieve the UN's global goals by 2030 and global happiness and well-being for all of life on Earth by 2050. And it reminds me of a social meme that I saw recently. Happiness is the new rich. Inner peace is the new success. Health is the new wealth. And kindness is the new cool. So this week, the next body of work we're going to touch on is the work being done into the science of happiness by the Greater Good Science Center at the University of Berkeley in San Francisco. We'll actually be looking at their model of the science of happiness at work too, but that's for another episode. And as we do each week, we'll consider how we can use all of this in our self-coaching. And I've got a new tool to share with you that I think you'll really enjoy this week, called Awe Writing. Sounds fun. Now, the Greater Good Science Center was founded in 2001, and it's at the forefront of exploring the roots of happy and compassionate individuals, strong social bonds, and altruistic behavior, as they call it, the science of a meaningful life. As part of the university's research unit, the 1927 Institute of Human Development, they sponsor groundbreaking scientific research into social and emotional well-being, combining psychology, sociology, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology. All exciting things. What makes the Greater Good Science Center unique? Because positive psychology research is now getting established at universities worldwide, is how committed they are to sharing this work with individuals like me, businesses, and policymakers. The center's founding mission looks to support cultural shifts in the ways that we view human nature, how we understand the sources of true happiness, and value connections to each other, all in service of promoting a kinder and more compassionate society. The overall premise at the Greater Good Science Center comes from a fundamental finding from positive psychology, that happiness is inextricably linked to having strong social connections and contributing to something bigger than yourself, the greater good. Since we're looking for a formula for happiness for ourselves, let's look into what the Greater Good Science Center includes in theirs. I'll touch on all the constructs they consider, but in light of the pandemic, I'll go into some specifically in more detail today and how we can use these to expand the coaching through chaos and change that we started last week. I actually studied with the Greater Good Science Center back in 2014 and again in 2018. Decide which elements resonate for you, if they're in your happiness and success definition already, or if you'd like to include more of them. Remember from our session on perma-happiness, I spoke about self-judgment. If you find through this exploration that you don't have enough of any of these in your life currently, take care of your inner self-critic while we go through this. And I do recommend actually that you keep working with your inner self-critic, especially as you assess your life for what happiness elements you do and don't have enough of. You'll find this work and my free coaching tools in episodes 1.12, 1.13, and 1.14. So what's included in this academic view of the science of happiness? Well, it is an enormous body of work. It took me over 3 months to study my way through their material. So in a nutshell, it covers, firstly, the role of positive emotions within happiness, then the power of connection, social connections, affiliation, affection, attachment, and empathy. Kindness and compassion gets a big focus, including self-compassion, as does cooperation and reconciliation, forgiveness and trust. Gratitude. Then they look into how mindfulness, engagement, attention, and focus contribute to happiness, as well as the mental habits of happiness, such as self-compassion, flow, and optimism, as well as new areas of research into awe, wonder, and beauty. Now, for simplicity, I'm going to look into 3 areas today. That's not to say I won't be covering all the material in the future. As I said at the start of this exploration into the science of your happiness, here at Happiness Matters, we have 8 foundational pillars, and the work of the Greater Good Science Center forms one of these pillars. You might already have heard a lot about gratitude, even mindfulness, so I've chosen to explore the constructs that are particularly relevant today and that might help us to ramp up over the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, social distancing, and self-isolation. So today we'll be looking more at positive emotions in your happiness, social connections and their role, and then cooperation as a key ingredient to your happiness and our happiness as a society. I think you know by now that at Happiness Matters, we see happiness as more than just feeling good or hedonic pleasure. However, both Martin Seligman in his PERMA model of happiness and the Greater Good Science Center include positive emotions as essential components to our happiness. So while they're not our sole goal in our pursuit of happiness, they most certainly are more than just fleeting, frivolous sensations. We're looking at these positive emotions such as, and just feel them as I read out the list to you: joy, awe, wonder, feeling grateful, flow, delight, curiosity, kindness, tranquility, engagement, tenderness, warm-heartedness, connection, being at peace, closeness, optimism, serenity, savoring, lightness, love, sharing laughter. So they definitely feel good in terms of our biochemical experience. Just think of penguins or newborn babies or a beautiful sunset or what a hug feels like or when you laugh. These are all essential to our happiness. Leading researchers such as Dr. Barbara Fredrickson show us how these emotions have a huge effect on our minds and bodies. So the biochemical experience of these emotions is impacting our minds and our bodies, changing the very nature of who we are at a cellular level. When we are experiencing positive emotions, we open up. The emotions open us. They change the boundaries of our minds and our hearts. They expand our perspective on the world around us. And as a result of this opening, we become more creative, we see a wider perspective, and we become more expansive. The research shows that we actually get smarter on tests. We make better decisions. We are more motivated to achieve our goals. We're better at integrating more complex information. We're more able to look past racial and cultural differences. We can see individuals on the other side. We see oneness. We're more trusting and we can find win-win solutions in negotiation. We can see larger systems, larger forms of interconnection. And as well as this, so essential to solving our global response to COVID-19, with positive emotions and their effect on our minds and bodies, we become more resilient to setbacks, and we bounce back quicker from adversity. Isn't this incredible? So don't we all want more of positive emotions, not just for simple hedonic pleasure of feeling good, but for all the relational and social benefits that these feelings bring us? And these emotions also change us at a physical level. Scientists estimate that we replace about 1% of our body cells each day. So that's about 30% monthly. However, research is showing that the pace of cell renewal and the form of cell renewal doesn't just follow some predetermined DNA script. Our emotions are affecting that level of cellular change. So according to Fredrickson, what this suggests is that if we increase our daily diet of positive emotions, we broaden our awareness over time and fundamentally change who we become in the future. Positive emotions really do bring out the best in us. This is such an exciting topic. I could spend days here just talking about the neurochemicals of happiness: serotonin, endorphin, dopamine, GABA, oxytocin, even adrenaline for when you want to pick me up. Our coaching here on Happiness Matters is all about understanding how we can choose to feel these positive emotions on purpose and how we can choose to wash our cells in these chemicals every day on purpose. Now let's look at what the Greater Good Science Center's research is telling us about how social connections foster happiness and why they're such an essential ingredient for happiness. Overwhelmingly, this body of research forms the most widely replicated findings from the science of happiness. Our connections with others are instrumental for our happiness. They are one of the most important and enduring sources of happiness. They can even predict our happiness levels. And these connections include all of them: romantic relationships, friendships, parent-child, families, colleagues, and our communities, what's called our social capital. Two of positive psychology's pioneers, Ed Diener and Martin Seligman, who we met in a recent episode, wrote in their research report, Very Happy People, that good social relationships might be a necessary condition for high happiness. And we can see the necessity for strong social bonds when looking at the research on isolation and loneliness, something many of us are facing over this time of social distancing. Loneliness has many negative effects on us, on our health and well-being. For example, lonely people show hyperinflammation in their bodies, a worsened immune response, difficulties sleeping. And when people feel isolated, the same region in their brain lights up as when they experience real physical pain. So we are actually wired for connection. And research shows that our social connections are actually intertwined with our DNA. Evolutionary theory calls this our ultra-sociality, when being highly connected was essential for our survival. So affiliation, affection, and attachment are essential ingredients to our happiness. And so is empathy. One of our most effective skills we have for creating these happiness-essential social connections is our ability to empathize with others. And empathy is second nature to us. And I want to spend a bit more time on this now. We do hear about empathy a lot, especially when we look at leadership development programs and leadership coaching, cultivating empathy in order to create better connections to our teams and colleagues. But today's reality of social distancing and self-isolation is also the perfect time for us to be building our empathy skills in order to enhance social cohesion in our global village. What's interesting is that neuroscientists have identified an empathy circuit in our brains, which, if damaged, can curtail our ability to understand what other people are feeling. However, even if a section of this 10-part circuit is damaged, say for example in our childhood, we can still continue to cultivate and increase our ability to feel empathy, and we can do this all the way through our lives. British philosopher Roman Krznaric is an empathy advisor to the United Nations and has founded the world's first empathy museum and empathy library. He outlines 6 habits of highly empathetic people in his book, Empathy. 6 daily habits that we can use to change our brains and direct ourselves towards empathy. One of the best ways to strengthen our social connections, which are such an essential component of our happiness. So let's see. We can cultivate curiosity about strangers. Curiosity expands our empathy when we talk to others outside our usual social circle and we encounter different ways of experiencing and seeing the world. We can challenge prejudices and discover commonalities. So rather than labeling others and dismissing them, we can challenge our own preconceptions and prejudices by looking for what we have in common with people who are different to us. We can try another person's life. This is known as experiential empathy, or walk in another man's shoes. We can listen hard and open up. Mastering the art of radical listening, so really listening to another person without the need to interject with your own experience or your own solution, as well as getting better at showing your vulnerability. As Krznaric says, empathy is a two-way street. We can inspire mass action and social change. How can we use our social networks, even our social media networks, to spread empathy rather than information and unkindness? And lastly, we can develop an ambitious imagination. And this involves developing empathy for the most unlikely candidates. So yes, for those who are suffering, but also for those who are on the other side of the fence to us, our adversaries, just like Mahatma Gandhi did. The Greater Good Science Center focuses a great deal on pro-social behaviors, the social behaviors that benefit others and society, such as empathy, which we've just spoken about, kindness and compassion, and their relation to our happiness. What I want to look at as our last focus area this week are the particular pro-social behaviors that serve our happiness during times of challenges and conflict. These are what the Greater Good Science Center calls the science of cooperation and reconciliation. Things like apologizing, forgiving, and building trust. All skills that are pretty challenging for most of us, but are essential to have robust social connections in life that feed us. Let's look at cooperation specifically, especially since the whole principle of lockdown really can only happen, at least in the democratic countries of the world, by cooperation. We've taken to our homes to isolate as one of the largest acts of world kindness we have ever seen. So yes, it is for us too, our own health, but for most people, we're doing it for others, for the more vulnerable in our society, and for the long-term stability of our societies. Now, evolutionary theory tells us that cooperation is good for our survival. Our chances of survival were just way higher in groups than venturing out alone with those lions and snakes and limited food sources. And to investigate further, researchers tested to see if we are intuitively more selfish or cooperative. So which behaviors happen faster or more automatically? And it's the cooperative kind. Our first impulse is to cooperate. Our instinct is to cooperate. Now, this seems to go against Darwin's evolutionary theory of survival of the fittest. But to make sense of it, let's look at the research into the personality type named after Italian political philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli and his book The Prince, the Machiavellians. On self-report measures, Machiavellians are non-cooperative. They admit that they don't mind lying, cheating, and stepping on other people to get what they want and to rise in social hierarchies. And yet, when we look for evidence of this contributing to their happiness and success, we discover that they don't actually gain power, they don't have strong social ties, they feel disconnected and socially isolated, and experience a great deal of stress and strain, and they consistently report feeling less happy. Cooperation has happiness benefits. Neuroscience has even more interesting things to say that we can use to help us in our own definitions of happy and successful, no matter what. Cooperative behavior actually activates reward circuitry in the brain. So fascinatingly, working with others, working towards a common goal, lights up our brains in a very similar way that eating chocolate does. Pure pleasure, in other words. Okay, so there you have it, an abundance of happiness dimensions for you to consider, with insights into just a few of them: positive emotions, social connections, empathy, and cooperation. In upcoming episodes, I will definitely cover more of these happiness constructs introduced here today: trust, flow, compassion, kindness, focus, and what they could contribute to your own definition of happiness and success, no matter what. Now let's consider our own coaching when it comes to the insights from the Greater Good Science Center and re-look at what we've been exploring about our definitions. Have you considered now how cooperation is adding to or detracting from your current happiness? What about empathy? Are there gaps in your empathy that if you cultivated it, you'd be increasing your happiness? What edges might you need to cross to take advantage of these happiness ingredients? Remember in episode 1.32 called Discomfort Change Equals Happiness, we looked at how to work with our unhappiness using the edge work from organizational and relationship systems coaching. What's useful to you here in your self-coaching is to think about any discomfort or resistance you notice in yourself over today's topics. Anything edgy about empathy or cooperation or social bonds. See it as your indicator that you have an edge to cross, a signal that change is waiting for you. And you might want to consider what small steps of crossing over the edge might be available to you this week. Could you practice one of the empathy habits, such as cultivating curiosity about strangers, especially since we're all watching maps of the pandemic spread into countries we might never ever have thought about? As well as all these coaching questions, I've got a wonderful coaching tool to share with you from the Greater Good Science Center and my own studies with them, and I call it Awesome Awe Writing. Awe is one of the cutting-edge happiness constructs under investigation right now, and here's how the researchers are suggesting we cultivate it on purpose. Step by step. It's very easy to do. Find about 15 to 30 minutes and sit down with a piece of paper or on your computer. and think back to a time when you felt a sense of awe regarding something you witnessed or experienced. So something in your life where you felt a sense of vastness. It could be physical, such as an amazing view, or a piece of art or music, or something mental, such as a wonderful idea, even a religious or spiritual experience. Now, describe it in as much detail as you can. Where were you? What happened exactly? What were you thinking and feeling? How did your body feel? Your breath? What did you see, smell, taste? What did you do? All of the experience in as much detail as you can. Calling up this awesome awe moment awakens the feeling of awe in you again, and you get to relive it. It strengthens it and helps you step out of the mundane or whatever's holding you back. It relieves negative emotions, especially if you're feeling weighed down or overwhelmed. It connects you to something bigger and more significant in life. And what I love most of all is that it sparks the biochemical reactions of happiness in your body. How delightful. Now, if you want to coach with me and get some of this good stuff in your life, here's how you can. I am still offering free coaching if you are really struggling with anxiety and fear over this COVID-19 time. There are 30-minute sessions, coaching sessions, so individual coaching with me to help you calm your brain and get you started on your coaching journey. And you can book these free sessions by visiting our website, Happiness-Matters.coach, and clicking on the yellow button, Coach with Julia. Then, if you want to coach with me for longer, you can book an initial insight session where we can explore what's going on for you now and how I can help you. Do you want help with your relationships at work or at home? Perhaps you want to overhaul your whole life using midlife as your greatest opportunity to reassess and redirect your life. Now's the time. If you're sitting at home self-isolating and want to include more awe or joy in your life, if you want to strengthen your social connections so that they really do add to your happiness. As a final reminder, also on our website, you'll find all the past podcast episodes, show notes, and coaching tools. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. Please do share this podcast with as many of your friends, family, and colleagues who might be interested in learning how to coach themselves every day. Every Tuesday, Fraser and I have a new episode for you. And over this time, we do need to be filling ourselves up with happiness and success as much as we can, giving equal airtime to the positive around us and not just being focused on the negativity of COVID-19's spread. Next week, we're crossing to another hefty academic model of happiness by one of my most favorite teachers, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. And we'll be looking into his concept of whole being happiness and what this means for our own happiness definitions. Lastly, my wish for us all, may we be happy, may we be free. There is no better time to do this together. Bye for now from a very, very, very quiet night of lockdown. No evening music from our local pub, not a car, not even a dog howling at the waxing moon.
Thanks for joining us on this Happiness Matters podcast. Do join us again here next week on Tuesday. You can subscribe to this series at Apple Podcasts on iTunes, or you can sign up for it on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. COACH. Also, you can join our conversation on Facebook by following us there. Our Facebook page is also Happiness-Matters.coach.